Jurich arrived at the brigand's stronghold upon his steed, Argento. He had been riding for nearly 2 hours now, and the winter sun hung low in the sky. Only a few minutes of light remained as he squinted to count the number of figures inside the corral. Jurich knew the brigands raided by night, so arriving at sunset was his best chance at favorable odds. As he dismounted, a large brigand with a massive warhammer slung on his back came forward.
"What have we here?"
jibed the brigand, turning to see the reaction of his comrades, a half-elfen ranger wearing chainmail and a halfling rogue in leather. Obviously a berserker, the man was half Jurich's age, with fiery red hair and a beard woven into braids, his powerful arms unprotected and covered with tattoos. Jurich could see the ranger's bow resting on one of the gateposts. The short sword at his side appeared to be his only weapon. The halfling rogue, jumping from the top rail of the wooden corral, was brandishing a small axe on his right hip and a dirk on his left. "I've come here for your master," spoke Jurich in a tone that hinted no intent.
"Oh, have you now?"
returned the rogue in a tone that implied disbelief.
"And who might you be?"
said the berserker. "That's no concern of yours," answered Jurich.
"Oh, is that so? What break the bloody bolt we have here, mates?"
the brigand quipped ironically. Jurich had actually met Budrick Brimstone some 25 years earlier during the Battle of Kargold.
"Be on your way, old man,"
spoke the half-elf.
"But you'll be leaving that armor and your steed,"
added the halfling rogue.
"You can keep the sword,"
laughed the first brigand.
"For fuck's sake, look at that pig sticker,"
continued the berserker, referring to the pale pewter color of Jurich's cold dark steel longsword, completely unaware of its rarity and quality. Cold dark steel was only found in one part of the world, the mines of Kadasa, and only one race, the dwarfs, were able to forge it into weapons. Cold dark steel has the exceptional ability of not only being unbreakable, but it is also capable of holding a razor-sharp edge indefinitely. The three brigands worked their way closer to Jurich, the ranger and rogue each taking a flank. Recognizing their intentions, Jurich knew he was committed to a fight. At 50 years of age, Jurich Schoben had survived more peril and seen more death and bloodshed than any man should ever have to endure. He knew as he surveyed the three brigands before him that he was but a mere shadow of his former self, weakened by time and fate, yet resolute in will. And to the misfortune of these three brigands, for men like Jurich Schoben, sometimes will is all a man needs. Crossing his arms in front of him, Jurich drew his longsword and poignard in unison and let out a battle cry that could have shook the heavens, sending an icy chill up each brigand's spine. Knowing he must take the offensive, and to the surprise of the brigands, Jurich attacked. In alternating fashion, he swung his longsword, then lunged with his dagger, right, then left, forcing the enemy to backpedal, allowing Jurich to work his way closer to the stable wall. Having learned at a young age no paladin worth his salt would expose his back to a rogue, he landed a powerful frontal kick squarely to the berserker's stomach, sending him reeling. With haste, Jurich moved forward, replacing the space the berserker once occupied, blocking a horizontal attack from the rogue's axe, and parrying a lunge from the ranger's short sword. His back now to the wall, Jurich gathered himself and prepared to defend. The berserker brigand, infuriated from being bested by this old man, let out a battle cry of his own and charged Jurich with his warhammer raised above his head. Jurich then committed what would have been a fatal error had he been fighting more experienced soldiers. Timing the berserker's rush, Jurich lunged forward, expecting to pierce the berserker's midsection. Instead, Jurich lost his footing, slipping on the dung-covered ground. His neck now parallel to the ground and exposed, his right arm wielding his longsword extended out in front of him. The rogue, taking advantage of the situation, slashed at the unarmored area between Jurich's pauldrons and cuirass, slicing through his gambeson and creating a 6-inch gash in the Paladin's rib cage. Wincing in pain, Jurich did not have time to react before the berserker's hammer found its mark, hitting him flush in the back with the resounding noise of steel on steel. Jurich was now on his knees, with his hands out in front of him, the sting of pain under his arm being drowned out by the crippling pain in the center of his back. Sweat glistened down his brow as he snorted, then spat, sending blood and phlegm into the dusty ground in front of him. His parrying dagger lay to his left, his longsword to the right, both out of immediate reach. He turned his head to the left, squinting into the setting sun as the halfling moved closer, casting a shadow over him. The 3 brigands stood around him now, the halfling to his left, the ranger in front of him, and the berserker behind. Jurich, feeling the sting of sweat, briefly closed his eyes. In that brief moment in his mind, he heard the singing of steel, the unmistakable sound of swords clashing, then the thundering of hooves. He saw the faces of his forefathers and fallen comrades before him. He could hear the beating of his own heart, pounding like an orcish war drum. These visions, initially coming in flashes, began to slow until they were synchronous with the beating of his heart. He heard their voices faintly chanting, rising from a murmur to that of an echoing clap of thunder. Feeling a warm rush of energy surging through his veins, he repeated to himself the words he heard. Though much is taken, much abides. Hearing those words, Jurich knew he was not done yet. Snapping his eyes open, Jurich grabbed the halfling's lower leg with his left hand and a handful of dirt with his right. He flung the halfling into the air and let loose a stream of manure-filled soil in the direction of the half-elven ranger. The nimble rogue flipped backwards, landing securely on his feet. Jurich rolled to his right, going for his longsword. Grasping his longsword, Jurich rose to his feet and spun to see the berserker bearing down on him once again. The halfling rogue leaped through the air with both weapons above his head, attempting a finishing blow. With his offhand, Jurich caught the rogue in midair, swinging the diminutive brigand in a circular motion as both his weapons glanced off Jurich's pauldrons. Pulling him in close with a handful of hair, Jurich bit down on the halfling's neck, ripping off a large piece of flesh, then rotated, spitting gobs of blood and sinew into the onrushing berserker's eyes. Slamming the halfling to the ground, Jurich set his sights on the ranger, who was now running towards his bow. As the halfling lay at his feet, clutching his throat, streams of blood formed small puddles, staining the ground. Jurich reached down and grabbed the rogue's axe, driving his knee into the halfling's midsection, crushing his ribs in the process. Rising and spinning, Jurich flung the rogue's axe at the craven half-elf, penetrating his chainmail and severing his spine. The axe head buried deep in his back. Jurich then raised his longsword to the high guard and faced the berserker. His hilt held high, his blade angled back. Jurich stood firm as a statue. His stance, known as the Guard of the Hawk, perfect. The berserker, trying to disguise his fear, cocked his head to the left, then to the right, and moved within striking distance of Jurich. Jurich held fast, not flinching a muscle. The berserker attacked, letting out a blood-curdling scream that sounded more out of fear than rage. Jurich sidestepped the attack, plunging the tip of his weapon down like a raptor swooping for its prey. He turned his longsword horizontal and slashed, the razor-sharp blade opening up the brigand's midsection, spilling the brigand's entrails on the ground in front of him as his mighty warhammer hit nothing but air. Jurich then spun behind the berserker, executing a fluid backhanded slash, sending the brigand's severed head cascading across the blood-stained corral. Retrieving his weapons, Jurich Schoben made his way toward the brigand overlord's chambers. Ascending the spiral staircase toward the overlord's chambers, Jurich could feel the blood soaking through his gambeson. His heart was racing, his muscles tightening. Bugger rogue, he thought, admonishing the fact that he was poisoned.
I take it you killed my men,
Jurich heard Mardigan ask from the dimly lit room above him. I've always been fortunate when it comes to killing, answered Jurich as he entered the overlord's chamber. The chamber was lined with bookshelves, a massive oaken planning table covered with maps, scrolls, and other various parchments sat at the far end. The overlord, Bear Mardigan, stood in the corner, a mountain of a man, standing a full head taller than Jurich and also 10 years his senior. Jurich noticed the man's two-handed greatsword leaning against the wall well within Mardigan's reach. Mardigan suggested Jurich step closer into the candlelight. Jurich obliged.
No small feat killing 3 men,
stated Mardigan. Jurich did not respond. The muscles in his hands spasmed, causing his grip to lock around the hilt of his longsword, neither man breaking their gaze. Jurich asked, Are you familiar with the farmer's parable?
Nay,
answered Mardigan, holding his stare from just outside arm's reach. Jurich began. A farmer comes home one day to find that everything that gives meaning to his life is gone. Crops are burned, animals slaughtered, bodies and broken pieces of his life strewn about. Everything that he loved taken from him, even his children. One can only imagine the pit of despair, the hours of lamentations, the burden of existence. A life's work erupts from his misery. Years go by. His suffering becomes unbearable. One day he stops. The farmer, who is no longer a farmer, sees the wreckage he has left in his wake. It is now he who burns, he who slaughters, and he knows in his heart he must pay. Understanding the moral, Bear Mardigan reached for his greatsword, not quite fast enough. Jurich, closing the distance between them, slammed the hilt of his longsword into the bigger man's stomach, knocking him to his knees. Jurich then took the brigand's face in his hands, and while Mardigan still gasped for air, Jurich drove both his thumbs into the eyes of the brigand overlord. The once fearsome footpad, now blinded, let out a horrifying scream, reaching, clawing at Jurich's legs, and fumbling as if in the dark for his weapon, any weapon. Jurich then gripped Bear Mardigan by the back of his skull and slammed his face flush onto the table beside them, the holes that used to be his eyes soaking the various parchments crimson red. Jurich drew his poniard and with both hands quivering, plunged the large dagger through the base of the brigand overlord's skull. Wearily, with the poison now coursing through his entire body, Jurich descended the spiral staircase and headed for Thronefast. Approaching Thronefast, Jurich knew he didn't have much time. Judging by the fact that he was still alive, Jurich guessed the rogue had dipped his weapons in manticore venom, a particularly slow-working poison. The manticore venom first seizes the muscles, followed by blindness, madness, and then death. He had been traveling at a gallop's pace for nearly the entire distance. Every lope was now sending a wave of pain through his aching body. Crossing the massive iron city gates, Jurich slowed Argento to a canter as plumes of steaming breath streamed from his valiant steed's nostrils. The echoing sound of hooves clacking on cobblestone announced his arrival as Jurich ascended the narrow winding artery towards the king's inner sanctum. When Jurich arrived, he arduously dismounted, and the two paladins standing guard came forward. The former held Argento firmly by the reins, while the latter initially attempted to assist Jurich. Realizing who this was, the two paladins snapped to attention and stood fast. Jurich let out a deep, taxing breath, then gave a tacit nod, placing his hand on the nearest paladin's pauldron-covered shoulder, acknowledging his former brothers in arms. Stepping into the throne room, Jurich could feel the poison at work. His vision blurred, his body starting to fail him. Jurich hid it well. Avendir, recognizing his former captain of the guard, interrupted his court counselor and called Jurich forward. Kneeling before his king, Jurich informed the court that Bear Mardigan was dead.
What is it you desire, Sir Jurich?
Asked the king in a pleased tone. I'm afraid, my lord, what I desire you cannot grant, replied Jurich.
Speak freely, my friend,
ordered Avendir. What Jurich said next would be remembered and recited by paladins for over 500 years. I want to sail across the vast sea with no land in sight, standing at the helm of my own destiny. I want that. One more time. I want to be on the field of battle and feel the surge as 20 war horses go thundering by. I want another meal at the Dancing Dragon, to listen to one more bard's tale. I want one more bottle of elven wine, and then another. I want the warmth of a woman on a cool winter's night. I want to stand on the summit and feel the sun on my face for as long as I can. Walk the wall again. Storm the tower. Ford the river. Jurich stood looking off in the distance beyond the king, his vision failing. He continued. But most of all, I want to sleep. I want to sleep like I slept when I was a boy. Give me that. Just one time, his voice crackling with emotion. Unbuckling his cuirass, Jurich let it fall to the floor, sending an echoing clamor throughout the throne room. Jurich drew his poniard and handed it hilt first to the king. Avendir, seeing the bloodstains on Jurich's gambeson, understood his former captain's intent. It has been my life's honor to serve you, my lord, Jurich said weakly.
The honor was mine, my captain,
replied the king, his eyes beginning to well up with tears. Jurich moved closer, embracing Avendir. He whispered, I am undone, my lord, finished through and through. Jurich pulled himself tightly against Avendir's body, and with an act of grace and mercy, Avendir thrust the poniard under Jurich's ribs and upward, piercing his heart. Jurich Schoben's body went limp as he died in the arms of his king.